I suppose I should unmute myself first. Welcome into the Skol Purple Podcast. Off to a roaring start. Welcome in and welcome into a rare live Saturday edition of the Skol Purple Podcast, as we are here to talk about the Minnesota Vikings, of course. If you didn't know that, maybe this channel has been wrong for you the whole time, but glad you're listening, no matter if you're a Vikings fan or not. But it's kind of a snowy day right now in Northwest Iowa. Is it kind of the same way over there for you, Tony?
Yeah, it's a snowy day here in Minnesota as well. It's snowing about as much as these players are falling off the roster. I can tell you that much.
That's right. That's right. It's kind of bittersweet, right? You know, you got the mainstays that have been with the Minnesota Vikings for how long going away now. And it is, yeah, I mean, it's cool because we know that there's a new era coming and it's exciting, but also like, dang, these are some of the players I grew up watching for myself. I know you're a little older than me, but the Adam Thielens, that's right. I'll try to avoid that in the future. But the Eric Kendricks of the world, the Adam Thielens of the world, potentially the Harrison Smiths of the world coming as well. It sounds like more and more that Adam Thielen is going to be released as well. So I just wanted to do a quick live stream here on our YouTube channel. We'll post the audio later as well to our audio only feeds on Apple and Spotify. If you'd rather not have to look at us, you can just listen to the soothing tones of our voices without having to be scared by our faces. So there you go. That option is available too. And if you aren't scared of our faces, then thanks for not being scared of our faces, I guess.
thanks for sticking with us.
That's right. That's right. So glad to be with you on this Saturday as we record this, I should say. But Tony, I'm curious. I know you guys talked about Eric Kendricks the other day when I was away, and I'll be away again this coming week. Great timing with NFL free agency kicking off, I know. But Vikings release Eric Kendricks and now Adam Thielen. And it sounds like Harrison Smith is on the way. Plus, they waived Cam Dantzler, which we'll talk about in a moment. But Adam Thielen, I know you did a quick short on it yesterday. I think it boiled down to two things for Adam Thielen, right? You had a guy that was going to be making $19.7 million or whatever it was, right around there, $20 million almost to the salary cap, which the Vikings didn't want to pay because he's not worth it at this point in his career. I think we can all safely say that. Plus, his role was diminishing within the Vikings offense. And we saw it last year. JJ, obviously the number one. And then when TJ Hawkinson got here, he was clearly the number two. And you could even say at that point, too, that's when KJ Osborne became the number three threat on the offense ahead of Adam Thielen even. But, yeah, so it was kind of writing on the wall. If Adam Thielen was not going to take a pay cut, he was probably out the door. And here we are, Minnesota Vikings releasing him. Eric Kendricks earlier in the week I think for the lifelong Minnesota fans and the people that live in Minnesota, probably hurts a little bit more with Adam Thielen, but Eric Kendricks was a rock solid player in his prime. Has fallen off the cliff a little bit the last couple of years, and it's been unfortunate to see, but man, he was fun to watch in his prime. Adam Thielen, same thing. Him and Diggs in 2017, so much fun to watch. So yeah, they'll be missed, but you got to move on. You cannot continue to run it back every single year with the same crew, because eventually you get to this point where the Vikings are kind of in salary cap hell, if you want to put it that way. And now they're starting to clear space for 2024, but there's still some work to be done. So we're expecting more moves here in the coming days, and maybe even during the time that we are live on this show, we'll get some breaking Vikings news. That would be fantastic. But Vikings, if you're listening. But Tony, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Adam Thielen and that whole situation. I think we're kind of all ready to get rid of Caitlin, at least. So it's like with all her social media bashing and banter, I think we're happy that Caitlin Thielen's out of the picture. No offense to the Thielens, but she's been something else, to say the least, in the last little bit. So your thoughts on Adam Thielen?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think Caitlin's quite as bad as the Mahomes family. We'll say that much. But overall, I mean, look, at the end of the day, Adam was it's a fantastic story, right? Obviously, you talk about a guy, hometown kid. We all know the story. I'm not going to go through all of it, right? But it's a feel-good story.
Isn't he from Minnesota?
He might be. I'm not sure.
Didn't he go to college in Minnesota?
Something like that. Yeah. Randy Moss.
Didn't he play for the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah. Mankato. I think it just ultimately what people need to remember is that it's a business, and his cap number this year was huge. I mean, for a guy that didn't have much production last year, in the grand scheme of things, you can't pay a guy like that $19 million. I mean, $19 million should go to a guy that's a high-end number two, like a really high-end number two, or a low-end number one. And Thielen looked like maybe a decent number three last year. Like that was about where he landed. And so at the end of the day, it's just the cap number, the contract didn't match the output. And ultimately, where he is in the offense and where I think they look to utilize him, it just didn't make sense for any party involved. And I think that kind of gets lost in the in all the dialogue and the narratives, is that I think it makes sense for Thielen to move on too. If you like Adam Thielen and you love him as a player, or as a guy, or both, I think you kind of want Thielen to leave too. I mean, as much as we love having him on the team and, he's a Minnesota guy, I don't think he's going to get the type of opportunities here than he would potentially somewhere else. They made that fairly clear last year. And I'm not saying that's like to bash Kevin O'Connell or that I think the scheme is bad. I just think the way this offense looks to run, it doesn't really fit where Adam Thielen is in his career right now. I think Adam Thielen would work best on a team that has a very athletic quarterback that's going to move around a lot, because as we all know, Thielen he's a smart player. He's very good at reading defenses and finding soft spots in especially like a zone. So if he could get out into space and get a little crafty, be a possession receiver, I think he would make sense. To be honest with you, a team that comes to mind is I think he'd make sense for a team like Baltimore. As long as Lamar is willing to play under the franchise tag, which is a whole different story. But I think he makes a lot of sense there, because think about, he basically would be, in my opinion, a more dynamic Mark Andrews. So it just, there's a place for Adam Thielen out there. I don't think it's in the Vikings at in Egan, in Minneapolis. So for both parties involved, I think this was the best move.
So you heard it here first, folks. Tony Stegeman believes Adam Thielen is better than Mark Andrews at the tight end position.
Well, I'm just
Breaking
saying,
news.
I'm not throwing Mark Andrews out on the outside anytime soon. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, I think you're right in that it would give Lamar another reliable threat, no doubt about that. And that'd be a different subject for a different time and show. But yeah, I think he needs to go somewhere that is not necessarily a, how do you want to say it? Obviously he wants to go to a contender. That's the thing. I think Adam is pretty clearly looking to try and win a Super Bowl at this point. So I still think he could go to the Jets. I mean, I know they've got Garrett Wilson as their kind of their top guy, which he could run into the same problem in New York, by the way.
Are you telling me we could see Aaron Rodgers passing Adam Thielen? Throw up in my mouth. That sounds horrible.
I know. It sounds terrible, but could have happened. It could have happened next year when the Vikings get Aaron Rodgers after he goes to the Jets for a season. So that's got to happen, right? Like it's written in the clouds. It's written in the stone, or on the stone, I should say, that
on the NFL tablets.
Any Packers quarterback that went to the Packers and then went to the Jets, or was a Packer, went to the Jets, has to go to the Vikings to end their career. As much as I hate Aaron Rodgers, and trust me, I don't know if I would even want him here. I just have a feeling that could happen next year, especially if the Vikings don't find their quarterback in this draft. I could very well see that the Vikings part ways with Kirk Cousins and say, "Hey, Aaron, give us that competitive part of this competitive rebuild for one more season." And David says KC, that would be a good one. I think that's a really good one, David, because they have a lot of agents coming as well. I think Juju Smith-Schuster's a free agent. I can't remember if Marquez Valdez-Scantling is or not, but Kadarius Toney's going to be the new number one there. Obviously, Travis Kelce. So, again, Thielen is probably going to be the number two if he goes to, well, probably the number three receiving option under those two going to Kansas City. But I think that'd be a good option if he's looking to win a Super Bowl. Yeah, I think those three options, the Jets, the Ravens, the Chiefs, as we mentioned, David has mentioned as well. I think those are good options for him as well, but it'll be interesting. I mean, we wish him the best, obviously, despite what Caitlin has been up to on social media. We wish him the best. We're not going to throw him under the bus just because of his wife and all that melodrama. But I think at least Caitlin needs to realize that it's a business, and I don't think she gets that part of it yet. And I get it. She thinks her husband is worth $20 million a year. And I don't think there's many teams out there that would agree with that. I would be very surprised if Adam Thielen signs anywhere for anything over $10 million this next year, per year, at least. You know, I think that'd be pretty shocking.
Well, she's got to support her husband. You know, I it's always so funny
right.
too. Like, I get it. You know, it's kind of like when you hear players talk
her income is being threatened in the future. So.
Yeah. Well, not only that too, it's just like, you know, we all want to think highly of ourselves, and our family's going to do the same thing. And so it's an unbiased take, and you take it for what it is. You know, you hear players say that all the time at the end of the year about how much left they have in the tank and blah, 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 blah. It's same with the agents talk about, well, this guy's got Pro Bowls. And I mean, I think he's got MVP caliber years left in him. And you're thinking to yourself, like, this guy played 3 games, you know, or whatever it might be. So it's all a lot of great PR speak. And look, like I said, I think if as someone that really has enjoyed watching Adam Thielen and been surprised by him and allowed to you know, him to prove me wrong, and for me to publicly say you know, that he was much better than I ever gave him credit for early in his career, that is. You know, I think that he's got stuff left in the tank. I just think, again, the way that the Minnesota Vikings are looking to run their offense, it just doesn't there's not as much of a place for him and where his skill set is at right now. This is a much more stretch the defense type of a offense. and he's just not. He fits more in like a West Coast offense. That's going to be heavy on the run. Like honestly, in a lot of ways, he probably fit better in Mike Zimmer's offense, and it kind of makes sense.
Oh, interesting how that works.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. He's not a deep threat, and I think if the Vikings are looking for a wide receiver 2 going forward, they need a deep threat because Justin Jefferson can be that guy, but I think where JJ really thrives is the middle of the field. Obviously, he can win on the outside, he can win in the slot, he can win anywhere, but I think his ability to, run across the field and away from defenders is huge and a huge part of his game. And then you look at Adam Thielen, his forte nowadays is kind of almost that same mold where he's going to be between the 5 to 15, maybe 20, maybe a little further down the field yet. That's kind of where his sweet spot is at this point in his career, I would say, at least for receiving wise. And Justin Jefferson, he can kind of do it all, but they have TJ Hawkinson, right? So they've got him kind of to be in the 5 to 10, 15-yard range on the field. Now they need somebody to go down the field 30, 40, 50 yards and be able to catch a deep ball. That kind of threat the Vikings do not have on offense, and that's why the Vikings decided to go in a different direction, I believe. Adam Thielen was not that deep threat that the Vikings want to probably add. So I think that had a big thing to do with it there.
Yeah, sure. No, I completely agree. I mean, like we said, just the offense is just not designed for his skill set at this point. But like I said, we love Adam. Wish him all the best somewhere else.
The Skol Purple Podcast is a part of the Pigskin Podcast Network. And we also, as part of the Pigskin Podcast Network, have a sponsor called DraftKings. You ever heard of them? They are a sports book, and the action, Tony, never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer with tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports. You can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbooks is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000. And if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You could throw down on all the major action for baseball, spring training baseball going on right now, golf right up Tony's alley, MMA, and more. Plus, with same game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props, your betting options feel endless. And best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code TPPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes and the description below for those of you on YouTube for details. You can see that as well on our audio show when we post that later. So DraftKings Sportsbook, sponsor through the Pigskin Podcast Network. Tony, have you been doing any betting on some spring training baseball or any golf lately?
No golf, no spring training baseball, but I have had some basketball lineups. So been playing a little basketball here and there. It's hard because I am biased towards the Wolves, and you know how that goes sometimes.
Well, I do have my old school Timberwolves shirt on here, so it's definitely old school now. I have the kind of the same old school hat. It's weird, the new jerseys in the last 5 years or whenever it was, but yeah,
I like
the Wolves.
I like the new digs. I like the new digs. I think the lime green's kind of cool. When I see the old logo, Carson, when you see the old logo, I want you to hold on to your answer, but I want you to think of, who do you think of when you see the old Timberwolves logo? For me, I think of Sam Mitchell and Tom Gugliotta. Oh, that logo. So when I see that logo, I think of KG. You got to think of Kevin Garnett. Yeah, it's got to be KG.
Yep, absolutely. All right, gentlemen. And by gentlemen, I guess I mean just us here.
Me and my
David's
four
in the
personalities.
That's right. That's right. We got David in the comments. Over under yards, touchdowns for Adam Thielen next year. I wonder if that is available on DraftKings. You can find out at DraftKings Sportsbook online. Use code TPPN, by the way. So
That's right.
and then you can do that. I don't know if I would put an over under. I would say he's going to be under 600 receiving yards. I would put the over under probably at 550 maybe, but I would say
Yeah.
I would probably even take the under on 550. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's I that's a really hard one. That'd be a hard bet to make because it really is dependent, obviously, on where he's going to go and where he's going to end up. Um, it really is just going to be dependent on the type of offense he's in, the quarterback situation. It's hard to it's hard to even say like where the best place is or what the best situation is because if he goes to a room that's loaded with wide receiver talent, he's probably going to get lost and then not have a lot of opportunities. But at the same time, he needs to go somewhere where he can't be the focal point either, because I don't think he's at a level to be a number one certainly anymore. But I hate to say that. It makes me feel bad saying that.
Cam Dantzler, one of the other guys to go here, Tony. He was waived yesterday. Kind of I wouldn't say a drop dead shock, but definitely pretty surprising because he is a young player yet.
Yeah.
But I think for me, when I think of Cameron Dantzler and why the Vikings may have waived him, I think it probably came down to scheme fit, number one. And let's be honest, it just was not a fit for the scheme. Not a fit for the scheme for Cameron Dantzler. And it wasn't one of the guys that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah drafted either. So I think that goes with it. I think Brian Flores probably played a role in making that decision as well. And now things are really opened up for the Vikings to potentially either go get a free agent corner or draft one in the first round, which I know everybody's excited about drafting another first round corner because they've worked out so well in the past. But Cameron Dantzler no longer a Viking. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that one, I'm with you. I was not expecting that at all. And not that I'm a huge Cam guy, like you mentioned. I certainly have been critical of him at times in the past. But a guy that I think, generally speaking, we all felt like had some talent early on. When he got drafted, we got into that training camp. I think a lot of folks thought, this kid might have some talent there. There might be something to build. I just think Dantzler suffered from injuries, and then on top of it, he suffered from, I just think, a lack of confidence. I think he got really beat down with Zimmer and company and how that situation kind of panned out. With corners, you got to let them struggle. It's one of those positions where very rarely, like rarely, do you have guys come in the league and they're just, at the top of their position group immediately. I mean, most of these corners, even some of the best ones in the league, their first year or so, they kind of look, like, okay. That's about the best you can expect from a rookie corner is they look serviceable. And if they look serviceable their rookie year, that usually means you got something. So it just felt like maybe Zimmer pulled the plug early. He had guys that I think, like especially the Breeland situation, like Breeland looked terrible. Imagine being a young guy. You got this veteran in front of you that gets plugged into a starting spot, and he is very clearly terrible, like a liability. What that would tell me as a young player is I'm worse than this guy, and this guy is horrible. So I just think that Dantzler dealt with, again, injury issues, which happen. And then I just think his confidence got shaken, I don't know. And then it never recovered. One of them. It never recovered, and it just is what it is. So maybe while evaluating where he was, they just thought this guy probably deserves a fresh start somewhere else. I think that we'd have better options somewhere else. So surprising, yes. Am I completely disappointed about it? No.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Obviously, we'll never forget Chris Berman with his tiny Dantzler comment after the stripping of ISM, secret agent ISM, double agent
That's right.
In that Bears game. But that is probably the biggest play of Cam Dantzler's career, saving that game. So we can thank him for that. That was a great memory. And unfortunately, I just, I really did have high hopes for Dantzler when the Vikings drafted him. I know he was only a 4th round guy, but I thought his length and his speed at the time, I thought was a good fit. And I thought if the Vikings could mold him, which I don't think I think if Mike Zimmer would have taken the time to do it, I really don't think he did. That's just my feeling from the last couple of years of Zimmer. I think if they would have taken the time to mold him, I think he could have been better than what he is right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And especially after hearing, because he did Dantzler, I'd have to look at the time frame, but did Dantzler get brought in prior to Diggs leaving? Was his rookie season still with Diggs on the team? It might have been. But I know for sure Thielen had talked about, this guy's got something. Like he was covered him pretty tough and tight in training camp. That was a lot of, and I get that they're always going to say this, that, or whatever, but usually when you hear it from the players, it's a little less sugar coated, or I should say they're less likely to, pump up a guy for no reason, unlike some of the media or Paul Allen or, somebody like that. So that gave me hope. You hear guys that are pretty good at their craft, especially because at that time Thielen was at the top of his game. I mean, he was certainly, people were talking about him being maybe even the number 1 over Diggs, kind of 1A, 1B with Diggs. So I thought there was something there. I think you're right. I think Zimmer didn't have a lot of time for young corners, and some of these guys come in with a lot of swag, and we've talked about this before. Corners have to have the same kind of swag that a receiver has. They just have to, because those are the people they're covering. They're going to have to play the game. And I think Zimmer, he liked a guy that was more of a blue collar, lunch pail kind of guy. And, in today's league, these guys that play skill positions, they're just not like that. I mean, not obviously there are some, but think of a guy like Justin Jefferson. I think Justin Jefferson is close to a lunch pail guy in today's NFL that you're going to see at the receiver position. And he's still rocking the grills and doing the gritty, So it's like, you got to know what you got. And that was
closest gritty you're going to get.
That's right.
I just thank the Lord for that one.
Yeah. You're not going to see me doing the gritty. It's going to look worse than Adam Schefter's. But I just
and
think
Mike Gesicki's.
Oh, you know what? I think Gesicki gets a little bit too much hate. I thought his gritty was, not
he goes
great.
way too fast.
It does. Yes, it's a little herky jerky. I feel
not
like a
that
guy
I'm a
that
gritty
could probably,
expert by any means.
I think a guy that could probably do a really good gritty that's not a Minnesota Viking is Travis Kelce. I feel like he's got a little bit of moves. I think Kelce could put one on. I don't want to see it. I'm just saying. But anyway, I just think ultimately you're right.
Travis, if you're watching this, we don't want to see it. Repeat, we do not want to see it.
I mean, I'll take this back. If both Travis and Jason do it, I'll watch. But no, I think you're right. I think Zimmer probably got to the point where I think Zimmer also knew he was on thin ice, and he desperately wanted this team to, be in his, what he envisioned them to be. And, these young guys, they're going to struggle, and he didn't have any time for it. So to your point, I don't know if he was ever developed properly. And then again, you beat down a guy's confidence. It's tough to come back from that.
Last subject before we get off here today, everyone. Thank you for those of you that have tuned in. If you have any comments, be sure to get those in here real quick before we get this live stream wrapped up. But let's talk about Harrison Smith. The rumor mill on Twitter was going off yesterday, basically saying, and there was some actual credible reports in there too by Doogie Wolfson of KSTP and Score North. He says that the Vikings have been trying really hard to get Harrison Smith back, but it sounds like there may be talks falling through in terms of what number he could play at and all that kind of stuff. And so it sounds like Harrison Smith could potentially be out. And That one, I loved Adam, but Harrison Smith, I actually I have his jersey somewhere, um, and he obviously is always big time with some of the plays he's made in his career, interceptions, um, getting some timely stops on defense throughout his career, and I just always loved him because he is that lunch pail guy, like you mentioned. He is the lunch pail guy. He is the prototypical come to work. I'm going to get my job done. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it well. And I'm not going to spend too much time being happy about it.
Carson,
go ahead.
Breaking news while we're live on air here. Vikings just announced passing of Bud Grant.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. Passing of Bud Grant.
No.
Yeah. Just got the update. It says, we are absolutely devastated to announce legendary Vikings head coach and Hall of Fame Bud Grant passed away, 95.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So big ups for Bud. Obviously 95. By the way, while you digest that here, Carson, because I had to while you were talking.
Wow.
Interesting note with Bud Grant and myself. He followed, well, we'll say followed now, unfortunately, RIP, me on Twitter for whatever reason. Out of all the people to follow, he followed me. But yeah, man, I got to meet him. For those that are in the Twin Cities area or been to the Twin Cities area, if you were a Bud Grant fan, you may know that he puts on a big garage sale every year that has a lot of Vikings memorabilia, stuff from when he was obviously with the team, but then also the years that he spent still with the organization. So I have had a chance to meet him a couple times and shake his hand. Always very nice. So yeah, rest in peace, Bud Grant. Breaking news, everybody.
Greatest coach in Vikings history. It's not even close.
Yeah,
it's not even close. I love Mike Zimmer, and he's probably the closest, maybe along with Denny Green. But wow, that he lived a long life. But man, that's just kind of a
heavy
shocker,
news,
right?
Yeah, heavy news here on a Saturday. But yeah, and obviously, so, thoughts go out to the family, Bud's family. So hopefully everybody's doing okay there. And as you mentioned, Carson, long life, certainly Viking for life, in life and in death. But we're pretty shocked here on the podcast. That was big news, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just I saw it and I thought I gotta say something.
I saw your hand go up, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go."
Yeah. But
that's not the news we were hoping to get on the show today. But yeah, wow. No doubt about it. Bud Grant's legacy. The greatest coach in Vikings history, and maybe someday somebody will pass him. Hopefully someday somebody will, just because it'd be great news for the Vikings. But man, that's some tough news for Vikings fans. Bud Grant, the guy that brought the Vikings to all 4 of their Super Bowls. Obviously, the head coach for Fran Tarkington for all the years that he was there as well. And big reason why those Vikings defenses were so good. Purple People Eaters, of course.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, wow, that is some shocking, heartbreaking news this morning. So,
well, the neat thing is about that relationship too is that he's still, and I don't know, I can't confirm this, but when he was in the building at Winter Park, and I really mean that, in the building, like he had an office still with the organization, and so it's a neat story. Obviously, all the history that's there, but I think the Vikings have always done throughout the ownership, right, changes between McCombs, who, rest in peace, just passed away not that long ago, into the Wilf family. They've always kept him in the family with the Vikings organization. He's been a part of it. I still think my favorite thing about Bud is the not allowing the sleeves. It was the coldest in Minnesota weather, right? And no sleeves. We're out there in a polo shirt, on the side of
Yeah.
the at Met Stadium, and these players out there. But it was such an advantage. I mean, these guys were so mentally tough to be out there in the cold, and then you'd have these teams from California or certainly anywhere down south that have to come up here and play. And Bud understood that. He understood that advantage mentally of having the cold be almost like a part of your team. So yeah, tough news to hear. Hard to really segue from that.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
again, I know, Carson, not to put
Thanks for
words in your
bringing it
mouth,
up,
but
though.
yeah, I mean, I had to look at it. I couldn't not say anything. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's just, again, from the Skol Purple podcast to the family of the Grant family. Certainly, we you're with our thoughts here, and like I said, rest in peace, bud.
Yeah. Wish the family condolences and hope hope for the best in the future. But yeah, tough day for Skol Nation here, processing that news. But I let's as hard as it is, let's try and transition
Sure.
back to
Well, I do have.
Harrison Smith. Do
Yeah, I
you
was
have
gonna
more
say.
breaking news?
No. I was just gonna say
Okay,
I did have some thoughts
go
on
for it.
that. So yeah, back to Harrison Smith. I would agree with everything that you said, and I share your sentiment as far as I'm did not think he would be a piece that was going to leave. I certainly thought he was going to be another mainstay on the team or at least a mainstay that was going to be with us in 2023. But I do think Flores, you're right, probably wants to keep him, but we understand that he needs to come back at a negotiated rate, or a renegotiated rate. So yeah, I'll be surprised if we don't find a common ground there. I just think ultimately, if you're a Vikings fan, one thing you have to feel really good about over the last week is that one issue I had was Spielman, and I liked a lot of things he did, but I was definitely critical of other things that he did or didn't do. And one of the things he didn't do was he had it seemed like the inability to time when to move on from players, especially players that he drafted. So I think that, and that hurt our roster ultimately, like, the
Yep.
longevity of our roster. So I have appreciated the fact that this new front office has seemed to be more willing, certainly, to cut bait with players and move on from players much faster. Maybe looking at things from more of a numbers game, and I get that
Yeah.
there is
The
emotions that
true
you,
test, the true
yeah,
test, Tony, will be when they do that with their own players. Because let's
yes,
not
yes,
forget these are Spielman and Zimmer's players, and for some of them, not even.
yeah,
Well, I guess Spielman, but not Zimmer. Like Harrison Smith was actually drafted before Mike Zimmer got here. But continue.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. True test is going to be to see what they do with their own players. Um, let's hope they can move on from some of these not great draft picks they had this last year. But at the same time, yeah, I just think we should feel good about the fact that this team is seeming to, again, turn a new leaf a little bit when it comes to dealing with player personnel. And while we have the short term pain because we are losing familiar faces, fan favorites for a long time, it is time. Like it is time for us to move on, to get younger, to get faster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So, you know, I have appreciated the decisiveness of this group. And there's something to be said for that.
My guy Rap chiming in here in the YouTube
Mm.
comment section. Appreciate it, Rap. I don't know if you saw the news. Bud Grant passed away at 95. Don't know if
Yeah.
you saw that, man, but that's if you've been watching. But yeah, that's some tough news that we had to endure talking about. But even tougher news for the Grant family, I'm sure, and of course, Skull Nation as a whole. It's a tough day. But yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say on Harrison Smith is I think there's just so many. And this was a point I think Doogie Wolfson brought up when he was talking about it. Is there's only so many locker room guys that you can take away because you get away from the human element where it's easy for me on Madden franchise mode to cut bait with everybody and not have it affect my team, but
Right.
but when you're talking about actual human beings and you're talking about losing teammates that have been there for years,
Yeah.
or just have been huge influences on guys like a Harrison Smith, Adam Thielen, Eric Kendricks too.
When you get to know their families.
Right. Yeah. Get to know their families, be good friends off the field. Like that can have a huge impact on a locker room negatively. Now, if that's something the Vikings are okay with for a year or two, then by all means, I don't necessarily think they should stop from doing that or hold back from doing it. But I think his cap number was pretty big. They're not going to save a ton from what
Yeah.
I remember, right, Tony? But it does get him out of his contract for the rest of the final few years. So they would be off the books for that. And then into 2024 free agency, which looks like the Vikings are going to have plenty of money to spend next free agency. And who knows if they keep making more moves, which it'll be interesting to see if they make any more moves today now with the Bud Grant news coming out. I would doubt it, but
Yeah.
I think there's got to be more moves coming because they're still not cap compliant either. So
Yeah. Yeah. They still have a ways to go there. I had this thought, Carson, and I don't know if this has crossed your mind. It was probably really great timing on the Vikings part. Or I mean, not that they've solicited this, but great timing for the Vikings organization that survey that went out about organization and rating all these
oh
things
yeah,
came out
oh
before
man,
this offseason,
yeah.
because it was all like, oh, how much they the family oriented and
Notice
really
how they
care about the
waited to
players.
let that come out before making any news,
Yeah,
any
because
news
I don't
moves.
know if that survey would have looked the same next year. And look, it's not that what they're doing is bad, and there's nothing that I've seen them do so far that lends me to believe that they're being unfair. Like I don't see anything that they've
Right.
done where I'm like, if anything, the only situation I could see the Vikings maybe being a little, I don't want to say petty, but almost like where they're gonna stick their chest out a little bit is probably the Za'Darius situation, only because I think as an organization you have to be able to set the tone that the player isn't going to dictate what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because ultimately, I don't see why they kind of wouldn't release Za'Darius or at least try to trade him. And maybe that's why they're denying the release right now is because they're trying to find a trade partner, which I do
Yeah.
think is a high possibility. Not that they find one, but that's their plan. But yeah, that's the only situation where I've thought the Vikings might play a little hardball on this one, just because again, if you set that precedent, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that precedent with future players. But
Yeah.
all the others, I mean, the Thielen one made sense. Like I said, for all parties involved, Thielen could have taken a lesser deal too. Keep in mind, it's not all just on the Vikings. It
Right.
sounds like they were trying to rework a deal. So it's not like they said, "No, you're just out of here, buddy."
Right.
I'm assuming brought him a number. He didn't like it, and he chose to say no, and that's okay. The Kendricks thing, it's tough, but it makes sense. I mean, look at the cap situation you just mentioned. So I don't know, Carson. You tell me if you feel any different way, but I don't feel like they've been unfair with any of these. They all make
No.
sense.
No.
Um,
I totally agree.
yeah,
And I would argue, I think Jason over the cap put out on Twitter saying, "Oh, Vikings are making moves they should have made last year." Basically, and
yeah,
I agree with that. I know everybody's 13 wins, all this, but it was just a means to an end. Let's be honest here. I mean,
yeah,
the I think the Wilfs wanted to have one more year of competition, going really hard on this competition field. It's easy to say now, looking back, as now they make some of these moves, but I think that's where the Quasi literally put this wording the way he did because competitive first, rebuild second. It's kind of how it's looking for the Vikings. So
Yeah.
it'll be
Well,
interesting to see.
I will
other
say
moves.
this, just this quick little nugget, and it's
Mhm.
more just to shout out one of our other members of the Skull Purple podcast. But we were talking about this in our group chat off air, as you know, Carson. And Peter,
We have a group chat.
oh yeah, that's right. You're not in it. No, I'm just kidding. No, Peter.
Breaking news.
Yeah, we're all fired. No, no. Peter made a really good point when we were talking about this in the group chat. So shout out to Peter. I'm taking this from him, but I'm giving him credit live on air here. But he made a point which I thought was phenomenal, and that was, it probably made sense for us to try to be competitive last year because you get the equity, you build up a little equity now this offseason when we start making all these moves, because if we would have looked like trash last year,
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of folks in the media now where, they looked good last year, where we can say, well, we see how how well that KOC can do, and so you kind of build some trust there. Whereas if we
Yeah.
would have been trash last season, it's like, what is this guy doing? Now he's blowing it up. And
Right.
so you just, like I said, you build up some of that trust. I think they did some of that last year, where now they get a little bit of that benefit of the doubt, where if we just thought they had no idea what they were doing, we'd be ringing the alarms right now going like, what is this guy doing? Then next thing you know, we're going to be moving to Texas.
That's a whole nother conversation in our
Yeah.
group chat that we will not get into.
Yeah. This is not Red McCombs. I
Uh,
think the Wolves would probably rather move us to they're from Jersey, aren't they? I don't think they'd be going Texas.
All right, gentlemen, myself and Tony and everybody else that's tuning in here on YouTube, that is going to do it for this live stream. Make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on Spotify and Apple. We'll post this later there as well. And appreciate the support. Again, best wishes and our condolences go out to the Grant family. Bud Grant, again, Vikings legendary coach, died at 95 today as we record this live stream. So, but as always, Skol.
Skol.